took from Belgrade to Dracic not only his diploma from the seminary, but also a serious illness, scrofula, which he'd contracted through his life in damp and dank accommodation and poor food. The doctors prescribed sea air for him. His stay in the Savina monastery on the Gulf of Kotor, an area then under Austro-Hungarian administration, left traces in one of Nikolai's earliest works.
Eternity would, for me, be a short time fully to enjoy your loveliness, you beautiful Boca. Farewell, you pearl of this land.
Nikola was soon to leave his beloved Serbia for a time. After teaching for a short while in Leskovice, a village close to his own Lelic, Nikola received a stipendium to continue his studies abroad. An eyewitness tells that Nikola's departure to study abroad was decided in a conversation between Prote Alexa and the newly crowned King Petar I.
We are preparing everything for the great state of Yugoslavia. I want to send people for study who will be bishops in the new state. Find out who these youngsters are.
The Prote, without thinking twice, replied to him,
I could give you one name at once, Your Majesty, Nikola Velimirowitz.
Nikola Velimirowitz.
When Nikola arrived in Belgrade from the village where he was teaching, the king received him.
Go where you will and study what you will, but you must graduate in theology, as I want you to become a monk afterwards.
Nikola asked the king to defer a final decision until he had thought about it and asked his parents' blessing. Be that as it may, Nikola received a grant to study at the Old Catholic University in Bern, it being the most suitable Western university for Orthodox students. A generous grant allowed him to travel outside Switzerland and hear lectures by the finest theological professors in the German universities. After having passed his diploma examinations in Bern, Nikola completed his doctorate on the theme The Apostolic Faith in the Resurrection of Christ as the Foundation of the Doctrine of the Apostolic Church. In 1908, the Austro-Hungarian Empire annexed Bosnia and Herzegovina. Among the Serbs, both those under Turkish occupation and those at home, a great unrest was evident. This time, though, war was averted. Nikola was at that time already in England, completing his philosophical studies at Oxford, and then finishing his doctorate in the French language in Geneva with the theme Berkeley's Philosophy.
Dragi naš Nikola, sad dobili smo tvoje pismo.
Oh, dear Nicola, we've just got your very brief letter. As you wrote, in a bad mood, not knowing what to do, think or decide, to study and prepare for your exams or not, so if you don't feel you're ready to sit your exams and can't get what you need elsewhere, let me know how much you need me to send you. I'll take it from the valuable bank, which I will pay off with my shares, or will withdraw it from my savings account. I don't know where else. Your father, Dragomir.
Tvoj otac, Dragomir.
Our friend and worthy colleague, Nikola Velimirowitz, a doctor of theology who has spent a year in England and is working to finish his theological studies, has just most successfully completed his doctorate in philosophy. Dr. Velimirowitz will finally be returning to his homeland at the end of this month.
He returned to Belgrade with 2 diplomas and 2 doctorates. There were, however, to put it mildly, no doors standing open to Dr. Velimirowitz. Hiding behind administrative regulations, the educational and ecclesiastical authorities, unwilling to validate his diplomas, put pressure on the twofold Doctor of Science to complete the 7th and 8th grades of secondary school and pass his matriculation. While all this was happening, Nikola came to the brink of death a third time. The first time he was, as a 1-year-old baby, held to ransom by a highwayman. The second time, on the way home from school, he was pulled half dead out of the river by an older boy from Donja Leskovice, Sreten Savic, who saved him from drowning. The third time he was in danger of death, in 1909, was when, after his return to Belgrade, he buried his brother who had died of dysentery and then himself contracted this dangerous illness. After 3 weeks of treatment in the state hospital, the doctor let it be known that he was so ill that God alone could save him. Dr. Nikola Velimirowicz wasn't alarmed by this attitude on his doctor's part.
If God has need of my services, he will spare me.
After 6 weeks of serious illness, he was completely healed. He went straight from the hospital to the Metropolia and made it clear that he wanted and intended to fulfill his promise about the monastic profession. Metropolitan Dimitrie sent Dr. Velimirowicz to the nearby Rakovica monastery, where, after 2 weeks as a novice, he was professed on December 17, 1909. At his tonsuring, he received the name Nikolai. Dr. Nikolai was ordained priest on December 20 the same year. In Belgrade, it had been whispered for a long time that Dr. Velimirowicz was a great preacher. When the Belgrade press made it known that here a monk Nikolai would be preaching in the cathedral after Christmas on St. Stephen's Day, it was even early on difficult to find a place. The elite of Belgrade, one could say the nation's leaders, academics, university professors, generals, and even the king came to hear his sermon.
A man is not that which can be put in a grave, but that which cannot be contained by the universe. God does not hide himself from man. A sinful man hides from God, hides until he can see him no more. The Church must inspire the structure of a country, not imitate it.
But his hearers, among whom were rationalists and atheists, were each of them bewitched, or rather enraptured, in a state of ecstatic fervour till then unknown to them. A great preacher was born. When the king left the church, Nikolai welcomed a group of enthusiastic local residents. Some of them were shouting that he must immediately be taken to the Metropolia, which is where he belongs. This overzealous enthusiasm on the part of the people probably had an effect on the decision by Metropolitan Dimitrie, a few days later, to send Dr. Nikolai to study in Russia, to deepen his orthodoxy. From the time of his first academic debates with students and professors, he became known in St. Petersburg. It was, of course, learned that the monk with the double doctorate was spending some time at the faculty, and that he was making use of his time in Russia to get to know the people, to travel around that great country and become acquainted with the churches, monasteries, and holy lavras. Under the influence of the works of Dostoevsky and Soloviev, Dr. Nikolai began to think about the universal man, in contrast to Nietzsche's Superman.
The hero monk Dr. Nikolai Velimirovich, at the king's decree, is appointed an assistant tutor at the seminary of St. Sava. The salary will not be enough to support you, and so how can you, out of it, set aside anything to pay your debts?
Before this appointment, the theological faculty of the University of Bern once again offered Dr. Velimirovich the position of assistant tutor at the university, and at the same time the editorship of the well-known journal, the International Theological Review, which was produced in 3 languages.
As far as I know, we can find nothing else, no other source for the paying off of the debt than the publishing of sermons.
We hear that Dr. Nikolai will soon be returning to his homeland from Russia, having gone there for a time at the beginning of the year.